guys, good morning and welcome to this Sunday, this Sunday's review. So I have been reading a book, a biography of Katie Hopkins. I suspect some of you may have actually just switched off the camera at this point because people, as she quite obviously states within her book, believe that she is like a toddler needing attention all the time and wanting attention, doing things to gain attention at all times, in all occasions. Now, I have to admit, when I told people that I was reading Katie Hopkins' biography, Rude, most people, or at least some people, just, oh, you're reading about that woman, are you? And I have to admit, I think in this day and age, in order to solve any problem, you have to have a dialogue, So you have to have people on both ends of the severe spectrum talking about their point of view in order to find a happy medium to go through, or at least a put up with line that people are prepared to put up with, so I am happy to read Katie Hopkins' book Rude, and the reason why I was inspired to read it is because I saw what she was doing on Rebel Media, and I saw the abuse given to people who are critical or who express their opinions about something, because you can explain away as much as you like, you can explain the reasoning behind something, but that doesn't make a person like it. Like, you can explain to me why you like the colour blue. It doesn't make me like the colour blue. It doesn't mean that I will ever like the colour blue. It just means that I can understand why you like the colour blue. And I can put up with the fact that you like the colour blue because I understand your motivations behind liking the colour blue. So when it comes to Katie Hopkins, I thought some of the things that she said were dead on. And I have to admit, I know the disabled community aren't going to like this, but I really liked the way she portrayed a hospital. It is not only a vision of how people are capable of coping with horrific things happening to them. It is a symbol of what you are to become. It is a vision of what you might be. And I think at the base of it, you have to have a bit of humility to actually acknowledge that you could be in that person's shoes. You have to be able to acknowledge that although you yourself wouldn't want to live like that, the fact is that you do. when you're actually there in their shoes, your opinion changes in a way that you wouldn't normally think it would. So, like, for example, I might see a dementia patient or a patient with dementia and think, if I get that incontinent and if I get that way, so that most of me just seems to be a glass-eyed empty box, I wouldn't want to live like that, and if there's nothing I could do, please just end it for me. I might feel like that about that now, but when I'm actually the empty glass box, or at least when I'm actually that person that looks like an empty glass box but may not be, I might feel entirely different about it, So I thought I loved Katie's description of the hospital because, obviously for those reasons, I just absolutely loved her description of the hospital. Yes, it's rude. Yes, some people might consider her rudeness as candour. Yes, it's hurtful to certain audiences that are sensitive at the moment and going through a lot of pain. But for me, I thought that was a fabulous description of a hospital, and I have personal experience where I'm thinking that, with my transplantation, if this goes wrong, that might be what I will be. If my kidney transplant went wrong, I might not have been here. So it gives you a certain amount of admiration. So yes, it is considered as rude by most, but some people like me would consider it as candour. Candour is not, it is not being, it's not tippy-toeing around feelings. Candour is not pandering to another person's will or wishes. It is portraying the world in a blunt and obvious fashion. The other thing that I liked about it, call me Islamophobic if you like, but how she portrays how she sees a woman in a fully clad burqa. I absolutely loved it, because I know for a fact that Islamic women who see the way that I dress, who see the way that most Western women dress, will have opinions that are rather candid. Will have opinions that do not match my own, and will have opinions that are, quite frankly, hurtful, or in other words, rude to me, to my sense of palate. To my palate, that would be rude. To my sense of taste, that would be rude. But I know, for example, that Islamic women, some Islamic women, I'm not saying all, do think that we in the West look very tarty, that we're advertising ourselves, and all she's expressing is our, maybe not our expression, but certainly mine and her expressions, opinions on what opinions we should and should not be allowed to say. I should be allowed to say that I don't like the colour blue. As I said, it may or may not be reasonable, but there'll be a psychological reason why I may not like the colour blue, or pink, or brown, or purple. I don't really like the burqa because it reminds me of the veil, and it reminds me of what I was taught as a child, as a Catholic, growing up in a Roman Catholic background, ethnicity, how men perceive women, and I personally, as someone who knows a lot of psychologists, cannot say that the burqa does not change the perspective that men have on women, for good and for bad. So, the perspective that I think we all share is that we should have we should consider another woman, the next woman we meet, to be just as important as, let's say, our sister. We shouldn't just meet her and think of her as a blow-up doll. Even if she's got a gastrostomy in her tummy that makes her look like a blow-up doll, we should not actually say, "Ooh, you look like a blow-up doll," or at least maybe not. Be more aware of the social situation we're in. And if we can't, then we have to be more understanding and just put up with certain things. I am not advocating, if you have a disabled child, don't bother teaching it what is normal practice, because that doesn't help them in the long run. Like forms of dress, for example, certain behaviours of blind people, for example, rocking forwards and backwards and doing the kind of I'm anxious, obvious visual appearance of look at me, I'm really anxious. It doesn't help them in the long run. So, it's as Katie Hopkins says, the candid response to it is that kids who are brought up in special schools know that they're special, and because they're special they don't have to behave in a certain way. This should not happen. It should not be the case, all right? Yes, if you have a physical incapability, we're not going to expect you to do something that involves that non-existent physical capability. But if you have the capability, you should at least try not to act like a complete beep, as Katie Hopkins would say, or at least I think she would say, I found bits on the book refreshing, and I don't think they're Islamophobic. I really don't. I think that they're just being candid and honest, and I think there cannot be a dialogue without a bit of honesty. It might not be to your taste, like most people who say, well, I think that disabled people should just, be more considerate towards society, and that they should end it all, as it were. They should commit suicide, and are there no workhouses is what that's reminiscent of me. But that's me. It's not another person. Economically, we don't make economic decisions based on logic. We tend to make our spending decisions based on emotions. So if you're poorer, you do tend to spend a lot more than if you're richer, because there's like an emotional thing attached with things. Getting things gives you a bit of a high, and then you calm down from it, a bit of a serotonin kick. It kind of reassures you that you can do things. But I am rambling on about something else. The ending of the book I absolutely loved, where she encourages you to just behave how you might want to behave. She encourages you to be you. So and I think she genuinely means that. I think she genuinely means, you have your opinion and you stick to your opinion. Don't just allow other people to change your opinion by force, I thought it was interesting, her liking of the Sikhs. She likes the Sikhs because they seem to be a friendly bunch and they're very kind. I have my reservations about Sikhs, but I would, because I've had a different experience to her when it comes to Sikh people. Most of them are lovely. Most of them are absolutely lovely. But when you actually get into the faith and get into the actual, you cannot go in the Dharamsala. They believe that they're not going to allow you in with a dog, with a guide dog, which might cause problems, especially when it comes to epilepsy dogs and other things. So, there's a bit of cultural background there. And I myself, like Katie, have been accused of Islamophobia, accused of hating people of another faith orientation. I did religious studies as a degree, and when I did it, I wanted to do my dissertation on the similarities between Catholic family life and that of the Islamic family life, and I wanted to do a comparison. And then I wanted to kind of link it towards the theology, or at least maybe not, I was going to say the theology of terrorism. Now, I know that might seem shocking to a lot of people, but we all recognise that in different faith groups, we will get, a person who is, I'm just going to put it bluntly, who is unreasonable. We will always have a person who is unreasonable, who cannot show any sympathy towards the other, who deliberately would enforce their opinion and their way of life upon another person. You will get it in all groups. So I wasn't doing it as, an Islamophobic or Catholophobic thing, because Christianophobic, I think, should be another turn of phrase that we've got these days. I don't think it should be illegal. But I think that the Jewish population and the Islamic population do get a lot of... identity politics is mainly just privilege-based. It's very privilege-based, where as long as you can say how you're a victim, you get a certain amount of privileges. And I think that Islamophobia and I've forgotten what it's called now, but it's where you have a phobia of Jewish people, anti-Semitism. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism does give those two groups quite a lot of privileges. At the end of the day, there is a reason why 5% of the 1% in this nation are Jewish and are of the millionaire population of this country. As stated in Trevor Phillips' What We Know and Just Won't Say documentary, which interestingly on YouTube you can find, but whether it still plays or not is another matter, because I think that they allowed it once on the television and that was it. And I think that film, that was absolutely fabulous. That showed an enormous amount of humility on Trevor Phillips' part to actually say, look, I'm sorry, but I think we are getting lost here and it's just not working. And I think there's something systemic about our belief that religion causes our culture when it's not. Culture is partially geographical, and we just don't recognise that. Geographical and, physiological based aspects to culture. They're not just based in faith alone. And I think people base their culture, their ethnicity in faith alone, which is why I make a political statement in saying that I am ethnically Roman Catholic. Because you get very, very few people who would say, well, I'm ethnically Christian. I'm ethnically just this, but my faith is something rather different. So I thought that I would put that I'm ethnically Roman Catholic down. So her bit on Roman Catholics and Islamics being very, very similar in their hateful behaviours as the other, I think is quite truthful. I think, unfortunately, in all faiths you get unreasonable people. And, and she met her husband whilst he was already in a relationship. So they're not going to get the best of responses in behavioural terms. Telling people that they're going to go to hell, that's pretty rude and inconsiderate to their feelings and emotions, but they're allowed to do it. So why isn't Katie allowed to express her opinion? Now, I do recognise that opinions have their consequences and that you can't escape a consequence of an opinion, and that if opinions get a momentum, that things like the Holocaust can happen. But there has to be a dialogue, there has to be a certain balance to be had, and I think that it is not balanced not to represent views from both sides when you are representing an argument. Okay, so I liked this book by Katie Hopkins. It does have some really quite amusing bits in it that we'd all find amusing, especially in her end quote. A lot of them are sexual based though, so it is a book for certain age groups to read. It is not a book for kids necessarily. I would have said from about 16 to 18-year-olds should be allowed to read this. But I'm a bit liberal, I mean, we get movies these days that are said that they're PG, and like the Hunger Games. I wouldn't necessarily say that the Hunger Games were PG, but I wouldn't take my 6-year-old to see the Hunger Games, put it that way. I wouldn't take my average 5 to 10-year-old to see some of the films I've seen on Batman and Spider-Man and other things. But maybe I'm just a prude. So yeah, if you want to see someone showing a certain amount of great humility, especially when it comes to fat people, because I have my issues with fat people too, I find it a bit irritating, and I was brought up on a feeding machine, so you know I had a guilt trip afterwards when I was eating a massive amounts after my transplant, and I was crying my eyes out. I had to be reasoned with, actually. I was so upset because I thought, I'm so greedy and fat, and I'm just so mean to fat people. I should have been nicer to fat people. I can see why they get fat now. I look back on it and I laugh, but that is actually how I felt. And when you are guilty because you know that what you're doing is wrong, you do tend to deflect. You tend to go into defense mechanisms. So, you know, fat people do have a lot of defense mechanisms, and one of them is to just tell themselves that I'm a lovely person, it's okay, I'm beautiful. And that's fine. You know, it's okay to say that you're beautiful. But it's not okay to ignore the long-term health consequences and to not talk about those, because there are some long-term health consequences. And and loving yourself might lead you on to losing weight so that you can live your life a bit better, you know. And if you are stick thin like I was and on a feeding machine, because of your genetic incapabilities, learning to love yourself is important for your own self-esteem and deciding what you want to do in life. It's part of self-actualization, and if you don't have a certain amount of self-actualization, you can't get on in the world, and you know you're more likely to harm yourself at the end of the day. So anyway, if you want a book, a good read that has a massive amount of humility in it, Katie Hopkins' book Rude does, believe it or not, have a certain amount of humility in it. You know, even though the word sorry is alien-esque to her, seemingly alien-esque to her. Read it, it is a good book. Alright then, see you later guys, bye bye.